My ex-wife cheated on me, left me for her wealthy boss, and became pregnant. But now that I've inherited millions, she wants me to pretend to be the father and begs for another chance. So here's the deal. My ex-wife 32 and I 35 split approximately 6 months ago. Within a month, she became pregnant. My ex-wife, let's call her Olivia, and I had been together for 3 years and married for a year and a half. She informed me she had an affair with her employer. Let's call him Samuel, 42. They had been involved for a few months. We have a 1-year-old boy together. When she told me about the affair, I was still processing it, but she had the divorce papers and everything ready because Samuel had informed her he was ready to marry her. So far, the only reason she had been holding out was that she wasn't sure if Samuel was ready to commit to her. But as soon as he made a commitment, she decided to ditch me and the kid and leave with him. The divorce was quite simple because I sought full custody of our son and was granted it. She didn't bother fighting for it. She didn't struggle for anything else. I got everything we had, and it made sense since now that she had Samuel, she was wealthy enough to live the lifestyle she desired. After the divorce was completed, I didn't hear from her until recently, but I had heard from a couple of mutual friends that she had announced her pregnancy just a few weeks after our divorce was finalized. I have no idea how far along she is, and it makes no difference to me because she is no longer a part of my life. The divorce had been difficult for me emotionally since, unlike her, I was truly in love with her and believed that we had something real in the 3 years we were together. I'd always observed she had a materialistic tendency, but I never imagined it would jeopardize our relationship. I have done well for myself as an oncologist, but I can't deny that Samuel is richer than me. He wants the company where my wife used to work, even though they had been quite close since she began working there. I'd never felt intimidated by him because I thought they were great friends, and I was always confident in our relationship. I believed Olivia loved me as much as I loved her. Clearly, I was mistaken, since if it were the case, she would not have found it so simple to dump me and depart. And I can understand why you might find it simple to abandon me, but how can someone give birth to a child and then abandon them? It makes no sense to me. She didn't even check in on how her son was doing after the divorce, which made it much easier for me to detest her because that's what she deserved. When she left me, she tried to explain that she was going because I never made time for her, whereas Samuel was always there for her. However, fooling me is not so easy. I knew the actual reason she was leaving was that he was considerably wealthier than me. But when I brought it up with her, she started shouting at me and acting as if I were a bad person for even hinting it, even if it was true. Anyway, the reason she recently contacted me had something to do with money, and this merely reinforced my point. I was recently named as the sole successor to my uncle's riches. For reference, my uncle was a successful businessman who owned one of the state's largest real estate enterprises. He never married and had no children of his own, but we were quite close. He had adored me, and I knew it, but I didn't anticipate him making me the only successor to everything he owned. Everything is still being reviewed, but I know for a fact that I'm dealing with an estate worth more than $2 million, and I haven't even begun to consider the value of his possessions. He left the company to me as well, although I am not interested in running it. Fortunately, Dad had given instructions for me in case I didn't want to operate the company. So according to him, I've chosen his CFO as the current CEO. As a result, the organization continues to operate efficiently, but I'll still benefit from whatever he makes from the company. So I could easily retire right now. However, I plan to continue working because I enjoy what I do, and with the money I have today, I can give back to society in much larger ways. But enough about my great aspirations. Let's discuss Olivia's less noble traits. Last week, I told a couple of my friends about my inheritance over dinner and drinks, and they were all startled. But most of them appeared pleased for me. I think one of them was upset though because someone snitched and informed Olivia about it. So that is how she found out. The next day she showed up at my place and said she needed to speak with me. She was significantly pregnant, and I was going to urge her to leave, but I had a feeling I'd want to hear her out. So, I agreed to let her in because she had returned after nearly 6 months since the divorce, and I suppose there had to be something vital that drew her here. However, when I let her in, I had no notion she was aware of my wealth. Anyway, she tried to make small chat with me, But I wasn't interested, so I just gave one-word responses. She then congratulated me on my inheritance, which was her first error. I was astonished she had found out about it, but I assumed one of my pals had ratted me out. So I said nothing and simply thanked her. She then inquired about our son and how he was doing, which hurt me because she had pretended not to have a child for the previous 6 months. Now she had a conscience and wanted to know how her child was doing. I ended up snapping, and I'm glad my son wasn't home at the moment. He was with my parents because otherwise, he would have heard what I said to his mother. I don't regret it though because she fully deserves it. Anyway, when she asked about our son, I encouraged her to get to the point and stop being evasive because I knew she was here for a reason. And not only to make small talk and inquire about topics she didn't really care about. I was growing impatient and she could tell, so she chose to go straight to the matter and informed me that she was here to discuss the new addition to our family. Obviously, I was perplexed because I had assumed she was pregnant with her boss's child, not mine. She was fairly certain about it while we were separating, and I was so emotionally disturbed about so many things that I didn't even question it. In any case, even if it was my baby, I was expecting a paternity test once the kid was delivered, and I was prepared to cope with it when it happened. But as long as she was pregnant, Samuel should deal with her because I didn't want anything to do with her unless the kid was mine. It seemed nasty, but that's how it was, and I didn't think she'd care because she was very certain the kid was Samuel's. Anyway, I was surprised when she referred to the infant as the new member of our family, because I wasn't sure if it was true or not. So, I decided to question her about whether she was certain about the paternity and whether the baby was not mine. I had no desire to deal with her anymore, but instead of getting the message, she told me that she hadn't done a paternity test yet but would if I asked. I, however, regardless of who the baby's biological father was, believed that because she was still married to me when the baby was conceived, I had an equal right to the child as well. We hadn't discussed it earlier, but it was about time, given that she was only a few weeks away from giving birth. Then she dropped the bombshell, telling me that she wanted my name on the baby's birth certificate as the father, because she thought it would be better for both of her children to have the same last name. I didn't see that coming, and it took me a few minutes to understand what she was saying. Once that was done, I instantly declined. I didn't want to, but I ended up laughing in her face since her plan was so ridiculous. It was rather simple for me to connect the connections, and she had already made the error of informing me about the bequest. So, she was clearly trying to ensure the baby's future, and perhaps even her own by ensuring that I accepted responsibility for the baby and possibly even paid child support. Now that I was suddenly wealthier than Samuel, she was singing a different tune around me, which I found amusing. So I ended up laughing in her face over her idea. I told her straight up that she was ridiculous for even considering that I would entertain such a notion, and urged her to leave my house since I didn't want to talk to her again. But she did not depart. She sat there and tried to reason with me. She informed me that she was willing to do a paternity test, but she felt that it would be better for her children to have some sort of relationship. Having the same last name, she believed, would help them bond better. She tried to make it appear as if she genuinely cared about the kids and their relationship, so she asked me to let her put my name on the baby's birth certificate. She wanted our son to have a sibling and to easily relate to the baby after they were born. It was pathetic because she hadn't been present for our baby in the previous 6 months. Despite having visiting rights, she had not checked in on him after our divorce. So I informed her that our son scarcely had a mother anymore. And now she was acting as if it was critical for her to ensure that our son could bond with a sister. Even if I believe that our son should have a relationship with his brother or half-sibling, depending on who the father is, adding my name to the birth certificate as the baby's father makes no sense if I'm not the biological father. I made it very obvious to her that if the paternity test shows that the father is present, I might even consider her notion. But if it doesn't, I'm just not interested. Once I made that plain to her, she tried to argue with me again, desperately attempting to make it appear as if she cared about her future baby's relationship with our kid, regardless of who the parents were. That's why she requested my name on the birth certificate. But I knew the real reason was my inheritance, and I informed her that I understood what she was looking for. So, she shouldn't take me for a fool. She was clearly upset with the implication that she was a gold digger. So she began shouting at me again, but I just told her to leave, or I'd call the cops, and she eventually went. I could tell she regretted leaving me, but it was just punishment for screwing me over. When she left, I was still fairly irritated about what she had just tried to pull off, since I couldn't believe she thought I was that naive and that I was simply going to let her name me as the baby's father. Of course, if I was the baby's father, I wouldn't have had any issues. But she believes that all of our children should have the same last name, which is why she wants to put my name on the baby's birth certificate, regardless of whether I am the father or not. This just didn't set well with me. If she had approached me to request a paternity test so that we could determine the true parentage and then proceed, I might have honored her request. But this was clearly a ploy for her to claim her share of my fortune. And because she couldn't come up with a viable plan, she was grasping at straws. I was furious and couldn't let this pass without retaliating, even though I hadn't done anything to retaliate against her thus far. But after she came to visit me and we had that conversation, I was so angry that I decided to contact Samuel and send him an email explaining what had transpired. At that point, I didn't care if he knew about her plot or not. I just wanted to cause trouble in some way, and it was the only thought I had. I was unsure whether it would work or not, but I got lucky. Samuel had no idea what she was up to behind his back. They did not tell me anything about this, obviously. He did not respond to my email, but after I wrote it to him, he supposedly got into a huge fight with Olivia, and I can't blame him. I believe anyone in his position would have done the same thing. But instead of cutting her losses and dealing with the matter at hand, she is simply too preoccupied with blaming me, and has been writing about it constantly. Not only has she posted, but she has also been contacting all of our shared acquaintances, attempting to persuade them to speak with me and clear the air. With Samuel, I have no idea what that means because, as far as I am concerned, I have already cleared the air with him by telling him the truth. Clearly, none of our friends are on her side. They believe that what I did was completely justified. This is unusual because I'm quite sure one of them had to be the one who turned me in and told her about the bequest. I just didn't figure out who it was so I could cut ties with them anyway. Until then, I have Olivia to deal with, and she is definitely getting on my last nerve. She has been blogging about how I'm jealous of her lifestyle and sad that she left me, which is why I've been actively attempting to harm her relationship with Samuel by feeding him a variety of lies about why she came to see me last week. She claims she just came to see me because I had not permitted her to see her son. Even that day, she fought with me because she wanted to see him, but I refused to bring him back from his grandparents' house. This is what she wants me to admit, but I'm not going to do that since it's obviously a lie. I've done everything I can to avoid speaking to or interacting with her, but she can't stop talking about me. It's getting a little too much because she's been posting about me every day for the past week, and it's just aggravating that she thinks she can get away with lying about what actually happened. Most of our friends are aware of the reality, but many of them have expressed their support in the comments area. Most of them don't know me, and I know she's doing all of this to gain sympathy, so that Samuel may reconcile with her. By a bunch of lies she's been spewing. However, if it comes at the expense of my reputation, even if it is among people who do not know me, I do not believe it is fair. So, I've been thinking about putting out the truth for everyone to see, and I've stayed back because I know it will severely ruin her reputation. Samuel will undoubtedly dump her. They aren't even married yet, so it will be relatively easy for him to leave while they're still engaged. But first, I want to ensure that I'm doing the proper thing. So, if I posted about how my ex-wife wanted to list me as her baby's father and the birth certificate needed to be updated, I did it. I actually submitted the truth before even accessing the comment box here since my intuition told me to just go for it, and that's exactly what I did. I came to validate my decision, and I'm pleased that the majority of people agree. Presenting my side of the story is the proper thing to do. I had blocked her following the divorce, but I unblocked her so she could view this post. The majority of our friends are backing me, and even though I am aware of this, I believe I am doing it regardless. I believe it means a lot to me that they are supporting me because I'm sure it's really pissed her off. She hasn't gotten the sympathy she sought, and as far as I know, she has not had to move back in with her parents because Samuel no longer wants her to live with him. It has been a week and 4 days since I sent Samuel that email, and while he has yet to respond, a lot has transpired since then. I am aware that there is danger in paradise. I'm relieved that this is happening to them because she abandoned me and our son for someone else, simply because he was wealthier than me. Samuel Wella. He was simply a home wrecker. I'm delighted that karma is finally catching up with them, and I hope this teaches them a lesson for a lifetime. Even if it doesn't matter because I'll still be wealthy and content, whether or not I have them. My son and I are even planning a vacation in a few weeks since I believe I need a break. I quote, "We've been pushing myself to the bone since the divorce, and now that I've finally gotten the closure I thought I needed, I think a well-deserved break will be quite beneficial. And when I return, I'll be prepared to work even harder." The only piece of the puzzle I haven't been able to solve is who had ratted me out to Olivia. Because I've asked several of my acquaintances if they had told Olivia anything about my inheritance, and all of them have denied any involvement. The people I told about the inheritance are very close to me, so the possibility that one of them was deceiving me is really upsetting. But that's the way it is anyway. I'm going to start organizing my vacation with my son right now. Update 2. Olivia showed up at my door again today, and this time my son was also present. So, I told her to leave right away since I was very sure he was not here to see him, and she was definitely come to pick a quarrel with me. I didn't want my son to witness me acting that way since Olivia just brings out the worst in me, but she refused to leave, telling me she was here to see her son. Since she had visiting rights, I couldn't really stop her, and it was true, so I had to let her in so she could see our son. I was quite unhappy about it, but if I had refused, there may have been legal consequences. I've already spoken with my lawyer about how to avoid this from happening again. To be clear, I don't object to her seeing our son at all. I definitely want our son to have a normal relationship with both of his parents, but I don't want her to come and go from his life whenever she wants. When she first left home to live with Samuel, she didn't even say goodbye to her son, and it was clear that in the following weeks he had struggled to cope with her absence. I did not want that to happen again, so I spoke with my lawyer, and we plan to petition for supervised custody visits so that I can keep track of when she sees him. And she can't just walk in and out whenever she wants, since that's bad for our son anyway. Our son was a little perplexed to meet her at first, but he looked content afterwards. She ignored me the entire time she was here, but I noticed she began to take a lot of film near the conclusion of her visit. I merely told her before she left that I didn't want her to upload any of those movies online, since I didn't want her son to have an online presence at such a young age. She simply told me that she was preserving these films for herself in case she missed him too much, which I believe is a bunch of BS. However, I did not quarrel with her because it would have been meaningless. That was what happened, and I thought it was strange, but she didn't do anything wrong, so I have no reason to complain. Update 3. So I contacted my lawyer to file for Olivia to have just supervised visiting privileges after she unexpectedly visited us to see our son a few days ago. But with what happened last night, I doubt that will be necessary. Following her last visit, she hadn't said anything negative about me, and she'd been rather inactive on social media for quite some time. She posted a few posts against me after I shared my side of the story, but just for a few days, and then she simply became silent. She then paid me a visit to see our son, which was also unusual. However, what occurred yesterday takes the cake, since she just walked up at random with a lawyer and handed me signed documentation stating that she was relinquishing custody of our child. She and her lawyer told me that they would file the petition and have it authorized by the family court soon. She only wanted to let me know before anything happened so I wouldn't be surprised. I couldn't help myself from questioning why she was doing this, especially because she had just visited us to meet our son a few days before, but she didn't give me a clear explanation. All she said was that she had decided it was best for our son to have only one parent, which would be me, because she would be too busy caring for her future child. And interacting with him the other day had made her understand that he was better off without his mother because he didn't appear to be linked to her, and she didn't feel anything around him. So she asked me to take over completely and promised that she would no longer bother us with her presence. I was perplexed about what was going on, and I felt sorry for my son because his mother had stated that she did not feel linked to him. Even though he doesn't understand what that means yet, I know it would harm him if he understood. But I didn't try to stop her because regardless of what I wanted, she had made up her mind. And if she didn't want to be a mother, I wasn't going to force her. She was definitely correct about one thing. It would be preferable for him to have only one parent around him, which would be me. Because I was willing to be his father before she left, I asked her whether she knew anything about her child's paternity. She said she had opted to have a paternity test done after the baby was born, so I didn't have to worry about it until then. She also promised that if the baby turned out to be mine, we would work out a solution that worked for both of us. But until then, she refused to speak with me. I respect that it may appear harsh, but I already have too much on my plate to be concerned about a child who is most likely not my own. Update: for weeks later, I finally got a response back from Samuel after nearly 4 weeks since I sent him the email. I learned a lot about Olivia in this circumstance. He began by apologizing to me for everything, but I won't get into that. Following the apologies, he informed me that they had taken a paternity test a few weeks prior and knew for certain that the kid was not mine. The baby is his. Even when she approached me, she was aware of it. That is why he was so sad and heartbroken. Things were a mess with her since it was clear that she did not actually belong to anyone in the literal meaning of the word. She tried to tell him that she had only come to see me to discuss seeing our son more frequently, since she claimed I wouldn't let her see him. However, he did not believe it. He decided to believe my account of what happened because he had been pressing her to come see our baby for the past 6 months, but she was the one who was always postponing. It seemed highly implausible that she had changed her mind so abruptly. So, he ended their engagement and asked her to move out. Then she departed. Even after she departed, she gave him a few videos of our son to establish that she had genuinely visited him a couple of times. As she had not been lying about what she had told him, but he's not an idiot, and he saw right through her. At least I now understand why she took all those videos. It was solely so she could exploit them to show herself correct. I can't think of anything more vile. She was essentially using our son to get back together with Samuel, and when she saw it wouldn't work, she opted to relinquish custody of him anyway. He told me that they will continue to raise their child together, and she is currently claiming an outrageous amount of child support, which is to be anticipated, given that she quit her job shortly after becoming engaged to him. But that's their problem now, and I'm finished with her. Soon, I will have full custody of our baby, and the process of inheriting all my uncle left me is almost complete. So I'll be pretty wealthy. 6 months ago, I couldn't have imagined living a life like this, but for now, I'm very pleased with how things have turned out. Here is the next story. The fragrance of coffee awoke me. I shifted over, expecting to discover Vanessa's warm body next to mine, but her side of the bed was still frigid and empty. I dragged myself out of bed, following the aroma of freshly brewed coffee downstairs. The kitchen was quiet, save for the soft hum of the refrigerator. "Vanessa," I called out, but there was no answer. I poured myself a cup and sat at the kitchen island, my thoughts straying back to the previous 25 years. Our small Connecticut suburb home had been our haven, full of laughter and love. Now it felt different. The sound of footsteps interrupted my thoughts. Naomi, our 16-year-old daughter, strolled in. Her hair was a jumble, and her eyelids were still heavy from sleep. "Morning, Dad," she murmured and reached for a drink. "Hello, sweetheart. Sleep soundly?" She shrugged, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "Where's Mom?" I exhaled. "I suppose she's already left for work." Naomi frowned again. "She has been leaving early a lot lately." Yes, she has," I agreed, trying not to express my concern. The rear door flung open and my 2 sons, Ethan and Lucas, stumbled inside, sweat gleaming on their foreheads. "How was the run?" I asked. Lucas grinned. "Crushed it, left Ethan in the dust." Ethan rolled his eyes. "Whatever gets you to sleep at night, brother." I chuckled as I watched them playfully shove each other. I enjoyed these moments, but lately they felt incomplete. "Dad, you okay?" Naomi's voice interrupted my thoughts. I forced a smile. "Yeah, just thinking about work. Speaking of which, I need to get going. Have a good day, kids." All right. As I drove to my architecture business, I couldn't shake a nagging feeling in my stomach. Vanessa was acting strangely and I couldn't figure out why. The day dragged on with client meetings and design critiques. By the time I reached home, the sun had already set. I entered the dining room, hoping to catch the tail end of dinner. Instead, I discovered Naomi clearing the table. "Hi, Dad," she said, holding a half-eaten plate in her hands. "If you're hungry, you can find leftovers in the refrigerator." "Thank you, darling. Where's your mother?" Naomi's face dropped slightly. "She received a call from work, said she had to return to the office." I felt my jaw clench. "Did she mention when she'd be back?" "No, just that it may be late." I nodded, attempting to keep my frustration under control. All right, why don't you finish here? I'll clean the dishes. While I scour, the plate was set, and my thoughts raced. This was unlike Vanessa. Regardless of how difficult her profession became, she would always prioritize her family. What had changed? The sound of the front door opening interrupted my thoughts. Vanessa walked in, exhausted yet strangely empowered. "Hey," I said, cleaning my hands with a towel. "A long day at the workplace?" She nodded and avoided my look. "Yeah, sorry about the supper. Things became hectic at work." "This appeared to be happening a lot lately," I commented, attempting to maintain a neutral tone. Vanessa stiffened. "What is that intended to mean?" "Nothing, just an observation. You have been working late a lot. Is everything okay?" She brushed past me and headed for the stairs. "Everything is fine, Carlos. I'm just busy. You understand how it is." But I didn't know, not anymore. Days stretched into weeks and the distance between us increased. Family dinners became rare, with Vanessa's chair frequently empty when she was home. She was constantly hooked to her phone, beaming as she read texts from someone I could not see. One night, while we were getting ready for bed, I decided to bring it up. "Vanessa, can we talk?" She looked up from her phone with an annoyed expression on her face. "What is this about?" "Us, the kids, the distance between us," I said. She sighed and put her phone down. "Carlos, there is no distance. I'm just very busy at work." "So busy you can't find time for your family?" Her eyes blazed. "That is not fair. I am working hard to provide for this family. We both work hard, Vanessa, but lately it seems like you're somewhere else." She rose abruptly. "I am right here, Carlos. If you feel distant, perhaps you should look at yourself." After that, she stormed out of the room, leaving me stunned and heartbroken. The next morning I got up early, ready to mend whatever had broken between us. I went downstairs to cook Vanessa's favorite breakfast, blueberry pancakes with fresh whipped cream. As I was preparing the table, I heard her phone buzz on the counter. Without thinking, I glanced at the screen and my heart stopped. It was a message from someone named Gregory. "Last night was incredible. I cannot wait to see you again, same time, same location." My hand shook as I took up the phone. I knew I shouldn't, but I couldn't help myself. I established a message thread, and what I witnessed shook my world. Intimate texts and explicit photographs, declarations of love and passion. I felt nauseous. The sound of footsteps on the stairs jolted me back into reality. I instantly put my phone down, my mind reeling. Vanessa walked in. Her eyes grew wide at the sight of breakfast. "Carlos, what's going on here?" I turned toward her, my words barely above a whisper. "Who is Gregory?" Her face lost its color. "What did you grab my phone?" My hand trembling, I saw the texts, Vanessa's images, and everything. She lunged for the telephone, panic in her eyes. "You have no right to access my phone, and you had absolutely no right to cheat on me," I shouted. My composure had finally broken. Vanessa stumbled back, tears welled in her eyes. "Carlos, I can explain." "What exactly are you explaining?" "How you have lied to me, to our children." She shook her head furiously. "It's not as you think. Gregory is only a friend you are sleeping with." I interrupted, my tone tinged with cynicism. Vanessa's face wrinkled. "I am sorry. I never intended for this to happen." I laughed bitterly. "Never intended for what to happen, the affair or being caught?" She reached for my arm, but I flinched away. "Do, Carlos, please. We can work it out. This was a mistake." "This is a mistake to neglect to pick up milk? This is betrayal." I echoed in disbelief, darkening my voice. "I know it is, but you need to comprehend. I felt really alone. You were constantly working, always concentrating on your projects." I shut her off. Anger rose in my chest. "Don't attempt to blame it on me, Vanessa. But we both have careers. However, I've never used that as an excuse to cheat." She slumped into a chair, her body shaking with weeping. "I apologize, I'm very sorry," I said. I stood there watching the lady I had loved for 25 years break apart. A part of me wanted to soothe her, to cuddle her, and assure her that we'd work things out. But a larger portion, the part consumed by pain and treachery, could not bear to look at her. "I believe you should go," I replied quietly. Her head snapped upward. "What?" "I want you to leave." I cannot look at you right now. Do Carlos Cama, please, she implored. Where am I meant to go? I shrugged, feeling numb. I do not know, to Gregor's perhaps. The word struck her as a physical blow. She stood up gently, her legs shook. How about the kids? I will talk to them. I spoke, my voice hollow. Just go, please. Vanessa nodded, defeat all across her face. She turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving behind the life we had created together. I collapsed into a chair, trying to understand what had just transpired. The fragrance of pancakes, which was once appealing, now made my stomach churn. I'm not sure how long I sat there, staring at nothing. The sound of footsteps startled me back into awareness. Naomi walked in. Her eyes widened as she saw the untouched meal and my shell-shocked appearance. Dad, what is going on? Where's Mom? I stared at my daughter, noticing the bewilderment and terror in her eyes. How was I supposed to tell her that her mother, whom she had always admired, had deceived us all? Naomi, sweetheart. I started, my voice cracking. Sit down, we need to talk. She sat across from me, her body tensed. Dad, you scare me. What is wrong? I took a long breath, attempting to find the appropriate words. Your mother, she won't be staying with us for a long time. Naomi scrunched her brow. What do you mean? Is she okay? She's fine, I promised, despite how terrible the words tasted in my mouth. But she's made some decisions that have harmed our family. What are the options, Naomi? She demanded, her voice raised. Dad, what is going on? I closed my eyes, bracing myself. Your mother has been seeing somebody else, another dude. The hush that ensued was deafening. When I opened my eyes, I noticed Naomi's face contort with shock, disbelief, and sorrow. No, she whispered. No, Mom would not do that. You are lying. I reached out for her hand, but she snatched it away. I wish I were, sweetheart. I really do. Naomi rose, her chair scraping against the floor. This is complete crap. Where is she? I'd like to chat with Mom. She's gone, Naomi, I said, my voice heavy. I asked her to go. My daughter looked at me, tears welling in her eyes. How could you do that? How could you simply kick her out? I felt my own eyes begin to burn. Do, Naomi, please try to understand. But she was already leaving the kitchen. Her tears echoed throughout the house. I heard her bedroom door slam shut, and the sound echoed through my chest like a physical blow. I hid my face in my hands, overcome by the enormity of what had occurred. How did we get here? How did our beautiful existence fall apart so quickly? The remainder of the day was a blur. I called Ethan and Lucas and asked them to come home early. Telling them was equally terrible as telling Naomi. Lucas stormed out of the home, leaving Ethan speechless and stunned. As night fell, I found myself sitting on the edge of my bed, staring into the empty place where Vanessa should have been. Her perfume lingered on the pillow, a painful reminder of what we had lost. A quiet knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. Naomi remained in the doorway, her eyes red and puffy. Dad, she whispered, her voice quiet. May I stay with you tonight? I nodded and patted the area next to me. She got into the bed, cuddling up against me like she had when she was younger. I'm sorry for yelling at you, she murmured into my shoulder. I threw my arm around her and kissed the top of her head. It's okay, honey. I understood. And we sat quietly for a while, each immersed in our own thoughts. What will happen now? Naomi eventually asked. I sighed and wished I had a better response for her. I'm not sure, honey, but we'll figure it out together. Okay? She nodded and sniffled quietly. I adore you, Dad. I adore you more than anything. As Naomi fell asleep, I looked out the window at the starlit sky. Our world had turned upside down, yet we remained a family, different, broken, but still intact. Whatever happened next, we'd face it together. That was all we could do. The morning sun shone through the drapes, waking me from a fitful slumber. Naomi was still snuggled up beside me. Her face was serene in slumber. I carefully untangled myself, being careful not to wake her. Downstairs, I discovered Ethan at the kitchen table, staring blankly at his breakfast. Morning, son, I said, while making myself a cup of coffee. He looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed. Hey, Dad, is there any word from Mom? I shook my head. Not yet. How are you holding up? Ethan shrugged. I do not know. It doesn't seem real, you know. I know, I replied, sitting across from him. Where is Lucas? Still in bed. He was up late, conversing with his lover. I nodded and sipped my coffee. The stillness stretched between us, filled with unspoken words. Finally, Ethan said, What will we do now, Dad? I set my cup down, meeting his gaze. We are going to move forward. It will not be easy, but we will accomplish it together. How? He inquired, his voice breaking. I stretched across the table and squeezed his hand. Take one day at a time, son. Take one day at a time. The following few weeks were a flurry of emotions and difficult choices. I knew we couldn't stay at the house. Too many memories. I located a tiny apartment nearby and began the process of moving out. Naomi confronted me one afternoon when I was packing the living room. Dad, we need to talk, she said, arms crossed. I set down the package I was holding. What's up, sweetie? I want to stay with Mom, she blurted out. The words hit me like a blow in the stomach. Naomi, I do not believe that is a smart idea right now. Why not? She demanded. She is still my mama. I took a deep breath and tried to remain cool. I know she is, but what she did, it's not only about her and me. It impacts all of us. So you are punishing her by taking us away, Naomi accused. No, that's not right, I replied. It is not fair, Naomi shouted, tears welling up in her eyes. You cannot simply determine everything for us. I approached her, but she drew away. Naomi, please try to understand. No, do you understand? She yelled. I despise this. I despise what Mom did. But I'm also upset because you're tearing our family apart with that. She stormed off, leaving me alone in a sea of half-packed boxes. The day we moved out was one of the most difficult of my life. As I locked the front door for the final time, I felt as if I was leaving a piece of me behind in the flat. Tension was intense. Lucas refused to unpack, arguing that this was only temporary. Ethan, on the other hand, poured himself into preparing his new room, scarcely conversing with anyone. Naomi alternated between fury and despair, isolating herself in her room for hours on end. One night, about a week after we relocated, I found myself sitting on the tiny balcony, staring at the strange skyline. The sound of the sliding door opening interrupted my reverie. Hey, Dad, Lucas agreed, joining me. I can't sleep. I shake my head. Too much on my thoughts, do you? He shrugged. Same, I suppose. Dad, are you and Mom really past the question? The question so direct caught me off guard. I don't know, son. Right now, it's difficult to conceive how we could recover from this. Lucas nodded, his gaze remote. I keep hoping to wake up and realize it was all a horrible dream. I wrapped my arm around his shoulders, pushing him closer. Me too, youngster. We sat quietly for a while, watching the city lights flicker. Dad, Lucas murmured gently. Yeah, I apologize for being such a jerk lately. I don't know how to deal with all of this. I squeezed his shoulder. It's okay, Lucas. We're all trying to figure this out. The next morning, I awoke determined to begin rebuilding our life. I called my parents to see if Ethan and Lucas could stay with them for a while. Of course they can, my mom said. But Carlos, how about you and Naomi? I exhaled. I'm not sure yet. I need to find a more permanent location where we can all be together. You know you are always welcome here, she offered. Thank you, Mom, but I believe we need our own space to heal. After hanging up, I broke the news to the children. Ethan and Lucas handled it better than I expected, but Naomi was infuriated. So shipping us off? She accused. It's only transitory, I attempted to explain, until I found us a suitable home. Whatever, she muttered and stormed off to a room. Seeing Ethan and Lucas drive away from my parents' house was bittersweet. I felt a combination of relief and loneliness. They will be okay. A voice spoke from behind me. I turned to face a woman I did not recognize. The person standing in the corridor was roughly my age, with nice eyes and a friendly smile. I apologize, she replied, offering her hand. I'm Adrian and I live down the hall. I shook her hand. Carlos, it's good to meet you. I couldn't help but smile. Over here, she admitted, appearing sorry. Are you going through a separation? I nodded. astonished by her directness. Yeah, it's complicated. Adrian's smile became empathetic. I have been there. It's difficult, but it gets better. Something about her tone made me believe her. Thanks, that's great to hear, I replied. Listen, she said. I know we just met, but if you ever need someone to talk to, I am a wonderful listener. I discovered myself smiling for the first time in days. I may take you up on that over the next 3 weeks. Adrian became a lifeline. We'd meet for coffee in the building's little courtyard, discussing everything and nothing. One evening, as we sat on a bench watching the sunset, she turned to me. Carlos, may I ask you something? She inquired. Sure, I asked, curious. Have you considered legal action against your wife? I just blinked, taken aback. I knew not really why. Adrian leaned forwards, her expression serious. I am a lawyer, Carlos. Specifically, I handle divorce matters. This is what your wife did. There may be grounds for more than a straightforward divorce. My mind whirled. What do you mean, emotional anguish, breach of confidence? Depending on her position at work, there may be professional implications. I shook my head, overwhelmed. I do not know, Adrian. I hadn't even considered divorce, let alone lawsuits. She put her hand on mine, her touch soothing. I understand that it is a lot to ponder, but you must protect yourself and your children. At least consider it. I nodded, my thoughts jumbled as I walked back to my apartment. Adrian's words echoed in my head. Could I really initiate legal action against Vanessa, the woman I had loved for 25 years? I opened the door and found Naomi seated on the couch, her face smeared with tears. Dad, she spoke, her voice trembling. I spoke with Mom today. I sat next to her, my heart racing. What exactly did she say? Naomi drew a frightened breath. She wants to see us, all of us. She says she'd want to explain. I felt a flash of rage. Explain what? Is there anything to explain? I asked, my voice rising. Dad, please, Naomi pleaded, standing up. Cannot we at least hear her out? I stood up and paced the little living room. Naomi, I know exactly what she did, I said firmly. But she is still our mommy, Naomi shouted, her voice breaking. Don't we deserve to know why? I stopped, staring at my daughter. The agony in her eyes mirrored mine. Okay, I said softly. Okay, we will meet with her. The game was scheduled for the next weekend. I spent the days preceding it, up to the very moment, nervously practicing what I would say and picturing every conceivable outcome. When the day arrived, I picked up Ethan and Lucas from my parents' house. The vehicle trip to the cafe where we had arranged to meet was somber, with tension in the air. We arrived first and chose a table in the corner. Vanessa walked in and my breath caught in my throat. She looked different. Her typical confidence had been replaced by doubt, and she seemed smaller somehow. Hello, she replied softly, sliding onto the seat across from me. Thank you for attending. I nodded stiffly, not trusting my ability to talk. Naomi interrupted the silence. Mom, why? Why did you do this? Vanessa's eyes flooded with tears. Oh, sweetheart, I made a horrible mistake. I was feeling lonely and ignored. But it is no justification. What I did was unacceptable. Damn right it was, Lucas grumbled. I warned you. But Vanessa raised her hand. No, he's correct. What I did was unacceptable. I betrayed each of you and I'm deeply sorry. Ethan, who had remained silent until now, spoke up. Do you still see him, Gregory? Vanessa shook her head vigorously. No, absolutely not. I ended it when your father found out. I now know how great a mistake it was. I finally discovered my voice. Vanessa, what were you expecting to happen here? Did you believe we would simply forgive and forget? She returned my stare, her eyes begging. No, Carlos. I do not expect forgiveness. I needed you all to know how sorry I am, and how much I regret what I did. The conversation went on, replete with tears, accusations, and sad realities. At the end, we were all emotionally weary as we stood to leave. Vanessa stretched out and touched my arm. Carlos, could we talk? Just the two of us. I hesitated and then nodded. Kids, please wait for me in the car. Vanessa spoke after they left. Carlos, I know I have no right to ask, but do we have any hope at all? I saw the lady I had loved for so long and felt nothing. The anguish remained, but so did the love. It was gone. No, Vanessa, I replied quietly. There isn't. Her face wrinkled, but she nodded. I understand, Carlos. I am very sorry for everything. As I walked away, I felt a weight lifted from my shoulders. It was not forgiveness, not yet, but it was a step toward resolution. Back in the flat, I knocked on Adrienne's door. Carlos, she replied, shocked. Is everything okay? I took a deep breath. I have been thinking about what you mentioned about legal action. Her eyes expanded. Oh, I want to do it. I spoke, my voice firm. I'd like to file for a divorce, and I want you to be my attorney. Adrienne nodded, her face serious. Okay. Let's get into the details. The following few months were a blur of legal battles and emotional turmoil. Adrienne was a godsend, walking me through the difficult divorce process with care and understanding. As we worked together, I became closer to her. She understood my pain as no one else could. After going through a painful divorce herself, she looked up at me one night as we were discussing some paperwork in her apartment. Her eyes were gentle. Carlos, I need to tell you something. My heart skipped a beat. What is it? She took a deep breath. I have feelings for you. And I understand that this is complicated, with me as your lawyer and everything going on in your divorce. But I shut her off. I leaned forward to kiss her, and when we separated, we were both smiling. I have feelings for you too, I said softly. Our bond developed slowly, both of us aware of the complications of our situation. But with each passing day, I felt my mending progressing. When I told the kids about Adrienne, they had diverse reactions. Naomi was skeptical, Ethan is cautious supportive, and Lucas, well, Lucas was Lucas. Are you certain about this? He inquired one day. I mean, isn't it pretty soon? I sat next to him on the couch. I understand it can appear that way, friend, but Adrienne, she makes me happy. I'm happier than I have been in a long time. Lucas nodded slowly. Okay, just be careful, okay? I drew him into a hug. I will be, I promise. As the divorce process progressed, events took an unexpected turn. The media became aware of the story and sensationalized it in the local news. A prominent architect's marriage breaks amid a scandal, the headlines shouted. Vanessa was compelled to publicly admit her involvement with Gregory. Her professional reputation has taken significant damage. As I saw her world disintegrate, I felt both vindication and guilt. Part of me wanted her to suffer as much as she had harmed me. Another part of me remembered the woman I used to adore. Adrienne, sensing my distress, gripped my hand. You okay? I nodded. Yeah, it is just a lot. She leaned her head against my shoulder. I understand, but you are doing the right thing, Carlos, for you and your children. As the court battles heated up, I found myself confronting Gregory for the first time since discovering the affair. He appeared haggard, the stress of the situation plainly taking its toll. Mr. Hastings, he declared, his voice weak. I'd like to apologize. I cut him off. Save it. Your apologies mean nothing to me. He nodded, his shoulders slumped. I understand. I simply want you to know that I never intended for any of this to happen. I laughed bitterly. Funny how deeds have consequences, is it not? I had a sense of closure as I walked away. Gregory's actions would have legal and professional consequences. The final blow came when the judge granted me complete custody of Naomi. Vanessa, her voice breaking, attempted to protest. Your Honor, please, she implored. She's also my daughter. The judge stared at her angrily. Mrs. Hastings, based on the facts and your daughter's age, the court considers it is in Naomi's best interest to remain with her father. As we exited the courthouse, Naomi turned to me, her eyes bright. Dad, may we go home now? I pulled her closer, feeling a burst of affection and protectiveness. Yes, sweetheart, let's go home. That night I was sitting on the balcony of our new apartment, a space large enough for all of us. Adrienne joined me. Thank you for your views, she said, passing me a glass of wine. I grinned and took a sip. I was thinking about how much had changed. A few months ago I felt my life had ended. Now she leaned forward and kissed me gently. And now I gaze at her. I felt a warmth creep across my chest. Now I believe that may be just the beginning. As we sat there, watching the city lights glitter, I felt a sensation of calm rush over me. The journey ahead would not be simple, but with Adrian by my side and my kids safe, I was prepared to face whatever came next. The sound of laughter emanated from within. Naomi and Adrian's girls were watching a film together. It was a new kind of family, unexpected and yet forming. But it was ours, and for the first time in a long time, I felt optimistic about my future. The morning of the final divorce hearing began with a sense of finality. I stepped in front of the mirror and adjusted my tie. When Naomi appeared at the doorway, "Are you ready for this, Dad?" she inquired, her voice quiet. I turned to face her. "As prepared as I will ever be. How about you?" She shrugged and played with the hem of her shirt. "I do not know. Feels strange, as if this is the end. You and your mother are no longer together." I moved up to her and placed my hands on her shoulders. "I understand how difficult it is, dear. But remember that just because your mother and I are no longer together does not mean we are no longer a family." Naomi gazed up at me, her eyes gleaming. "I promise." I hugged her as I said this. "Whatever happens in that courtroom today, you children are still the most important thing in my life." The ride to the courthouse was silent. Each of us was immersed in our own thoughts. Adrian greeted us at the entryway, her presence a soothing anchor. "You okay?" she asked, grasping my hand. I nodded. "Let's get this over with." Inside, Vanessa was already sitting with her attorney. Our gazes connected briefly, and I noticed a mixture of grief and resignation in hers. The judge appeared, and we all stood as he began to speak. I experienced a peculiar sense of déjà vu. Hadn't we just been arguing about custody? This time, though, things were different. "Mr. and Mrs. Hastings," the judge explained, "have you both studied and agreed on the terms of your divorce settlement?" "Yes, Your Honor," Vanessa and I responded in tandem. He nodded. "Very good. I hereby dissolve your marriage in accordance with the authority granted to me by the state of Connecticut." The thud of the gavel echoed around the courtroom, signaling the end of our 25-year marriage. As we filed out, Vanessa approached me. "Carlos, may we talk for a moment?" I looked at Adrian, who nodded encouragingly. "Sure." I spoke to Vanessa. We moved aside, away from the busy passageway. Vanessa took a big breath. "I just wanted to say I apologize for everything. I know it won't change things, but I want you to know that I sincerely regret what I did." I scrutinized her face, looking for any resemblance to the lady I once loved. "I appreciate it, Vanessa, but you're correct. Everything remains the same." She nodded, her eyes lowered. "I hope I've understood. I hope one day you will forgive me, not for my sake, but for yours and the children." I exhaled, feeling the weight of our common past. "Perhaps someday, but right now I need to focus on going forward and recreating our family in a new way." Vanessa looked over at Adrian, who was speaking quietly with Naomi. "She seems suitable for you," she said quietly. "She is," I responded. "Vanessa, I hope you find happiness too." "I really do." With one final nod, we parted ways as I walked back towards Adrian and Naomi. As we sat around the dinner table that night, I felt a chapter in my life come to a close. Adrian and her daughters, Naomi, Ethan, and Lucas. When I saw the faces of my new blended family, I felt a surge of hope. So I spoke, clearing my throat. "I'd like to discuss something with all of you." 5 pairs of eyes looked at me expectantly. "Adrian and I have been chatting, and we want to make this arrangement permanent. We want to buy a home together. A space large enough for all of us." The reaction was quick and varied. Naomi's eyes widened in amazement. Ethan grinned, and Lucas appeared skeptical. "Are you two getting married?" "What about Adrian's younger daughter, Sophia?" inquired excitedly. Adrian and I exchanged looks. We haven't discussed that yet," she spoke cautiously. "Right now, our primary focus is on bringing our families together under one roof. If that's good with everyone." There was a little quiet before Ethan spoke up. "I believe it's fantastic. I mean, we're virtually living together now, right?" Naomi nodded slowly. "Yeah, I suppose so. It would be lovely to have a proper home again." All eyes focused on Lucas, who had remained mute. "Lucas," I prompted softly. "What are you thinking, buddy?" He shrugged and pushed his food around the plate. "Whatever, we don't really have much of a choice." "Lucas," Adrian spoke gently. "Of course you have an option. We're a family now, all of us. This implies we make major decisions jointly. Lucas raised his eyes to meet Adrian's. Do you really? So, even if I said I didn't want to, you would not do it? I leaned forward and held my son's gaze. If you have real issues, Lucas, we'd want to hear them. Your feelings are important to us. He was quiet for a moment before sighing. It's as if we're replacing ing mom, as if we were pretending the last 18 years did not happen. The table went silent. I felt a knot grow in my throat as I realized the agony behind my son's remarks. Oh, Lucas, Adrian said, her voice soft. We're not attempting to replace your mother. Nobody could ever do that. We're simply creating something new. Not subtracting from your family. I nodded, reaching out to squeeze Lucas's hand. Your mother will always be a part of our life, buddy. Always. This is not about forgetting the past. It is about creating a future together. Lucas scanned the table, his gaze settling on each face. A little smile appeared on his lips. Okay, he replied softly. The tension surrounding the table dissipated, replaced with eager conversation about house searching and room configurations. As the weeks passed, we immersed ourselves in the search for our new home. It wasn't easy to find a property that could accommodate 7 people, but we eventually discovered a vast old Victorian with enough bedrooms and a large backyard. The day we moved in was chaotic, with boxes everywhere and people tripping over one another. But as we collapsed on the floor that night, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes and takeaway containers, I couldn't help but feel a sense of justice. Hey, Dad, Naomi said, leaning on my shoulder. Yeah, honey. I believe I want to begin visiting a therapist. I turned to gaze at her in amazement. Really? What brought this about? She shrugged and picked at the carpet. I have a lot of stuff to deal with, about Mom, the divorce and everything. I brought her close and kissed the top of her head. Naomi, I think that is an excellent idea. In fact, I was also considering seeing someone. Perhaps we might have some sessions together. She looked up at me with a slight smile on her face. Yes, I would enjoy that. The following few months were a blur of adjustment and recuperation. Naomi and I began visiting a therapist, both separately and together. It was not easy bringing up old wounds and confronting difficult facts, but gradually we began to heal. Naomi and I sat in the van after a particularly tough workout, both emotionally tired. Dad, she whispered, breaking the silence. Yeah, I asked, turning to face her. Do you think you'll ever forgive Mom? I sighed and turned to face her. I do not know, sweetie. Forgiveness is a difficult concept, but I'm working on it. Not for her sake, but for mine and your children. Naomi nodded, her gaze remote. I guess I'd like to forgive her too, but it's hard. I stretched out and squeezed her hand. I know it is, but we will get there together. As the months passed into the year, our new family fell into a groove. They were still tough patches, disagreements over home responsibilities, and adjusting to new rules and expectations, but altogether, we were pleased. One evening, Adrian and I sat on the porch swing, watching the kids play a frantic game of tag in the backyard. She smiled at me. So, Mr. Hastings, she replied with a glint in her eye, I've got a question for you. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, what is that, Miss Parker? She took a big breath, appearing worried. How do you feel about making this arrangement even more permanent? My heart skipped a beat. Adrian, are you? She retrieved a little box from her pocket and opened it, revealing a plain gold bracelet. Carlos Hastings, would you marry me? For a moment I was speechless. Then a grin appeared on my face. Adrian Parker, I'd be honored to marry you. A chorus of cheers interrupted our kiss. We looked up and saw all 5 children standing on the grass, laughing from ear to ear. It is about time, Ethan called out. Yeah. Lucas gave a sincere smile. What took you so long? While we were wrapped in a group hug, I felt a sense of fullness that I hadn't had in years. This was my family. It wasn't what I expected, yet it was just what I needed. The wedding was small and intimate, held in our backyard. As I stood beneath the floral arch watching Adrian approach me, I felt a wave of love and thankfulness. We have met here today, the officiant began as we exchanged vows. The officiant commemorated Carlos and Adrian's union by blending their families. I looked around at the small gathering. My parents sat on the front row, beaming with pride. Naomi, Ethan and Lucas stood beside me, with Adrienne's daughters flanking her. Vanessa sat in the back. Our gazes met briefly, and she offered me a faint, sad grin. I nodded in agreement. I was feeling a sense of closure. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the officiant declared. "You may kiss the bride." As our lips met, the backyard exploded with yells and applause. We turned to face our visitors hand in hand, eager to begin our new lives together. The months that followed were a blur of happiness and challenges. My architectural firm secured a significant contract, keeping me busier than ever. Adrienne's legal knowledge proved useful, as we navigated the challenges of managing a blended family. Lucas cleared his throat one evening as we were sitting at the dinner table. "So I've got some news," he added, appearing apprehensive. We all looked at him expectantly. "I was accepted into the summer internship program at my father's corporation," he said, with a tinge of pride in his voice. The table erupted in congratulations. "That is wonderful, Lucas," I exclaimed, full of pride. "But I assumed you were not interested in architecture?" He shrugged, a little smile appearing on his lips. "I was not, but after witnessing how passionate you are about it, I'm not sure I believe it rubbed off on me." As I looked around the table at my family, members old and new, I felt a sensation of satisfaction rush over me. We had braved the storm and emerged stronger on the other side. Later that night, as Adrienne and I prepared for bed, she turned to me with a serious gaze. "You understand," she said. "I ran into Gregory at the courts today. The mention of his name made me uncomfortable." "How'd that go?" she sighed while sitting on the side of the bed. "Not good for him, at least. He has lost everything, including his job and reputation." I sat next to her and processed this knowledge. "And how do you feel about this?" Adrienne stared at me with lovely eyes. "Honestly, I feel sorry for him. Don't get me wrong, what he did was horrific. But seeing someone's life utterly unravel doesn't feel nice." I nodded, acknowledging her sentiment. "And Vanessa, has anyone heard anything about her?" "According to what I've learned, she's struggling both personally and professionally. The affair during the divorce has taken its toll on her." I was silent for a minute, a jumble of emotions whirling inside me. Part of me wanted them to suffer, to feel the misery they had given us. But now I only feel sad for them. Adrian grasped my hand and squeezed it gently. "That's because you're a good guy, Carlos," he said. "And I think I believe that signifies you're beginning to forgive." I gazed at her. This woman had helped me reconstruct my life, and I felt a wave of affection. "I could not have done this without you," I said. She smiled and leaned in to kiss me lightly. "We accomplished it together. This is what partners do." As we relaxed into bed, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had taken us here. The agony, betrayal, and rage had all contributed to this moment of serenity and happiness. The next morning, I got up early and slipped out of bed without waking Adrienne. I made my way to the kitchen, planning to prepare breakfast, but Naomi was already there, nursing a latte. "Good morning, Dad," she murmured, glancing up from her phone. "You're awake early." I poured myself a cup and joined her at the counter. "May reveal the same about you. Is everything okay?" she asked. She nodded and then paused. "Actually, I spoke with Mom yesterday." I felt a flutter of anxiety in my chest. "Oh, how'd that go?" Naomi sighed and pushed her hair away from her face. "It was fine, I suppose. She appears different, sadder perhaps. She inquired about you and Adrian. What have you told her?" "The truth," Naomi spoke, meeting my delighted gaze. "Are you happy?" I nodded, experiencing a range of feelings. "How do you feel about all of this, sweetheart?" She remained silent for a minute, swirling her coffee absently. "I guess I am beginning to forgive her. It's not easy and I'm still upset at times, but I don't want to keep that anger for too long, I stretched out and squeezed her hand. "I understand exactly what you mean. And I am proud of you, Naomi. To forgive requires a great deal of strength." She smiled, a genuine bright smile that reminded me of when she was younger. I learned from the greatest father. As the rest of the family awoke, the house filled with the sounds of morning routines and fun banter. I felt a sensation of calm come over me. Do we, gone through so much? Faced challenges that I could never have anticipated. But we emerged stronger and more bonded than ever. This wasn't the life I had envisioned, but it was the one I loved, with Adrian at my side, our children surrounding us, and fresh adventures await. I was confident that whatever obstacles lay ahead, we would face them together. As I glanced about at my delightfully flawed family, I realized that even the most painful endings may result in the most wonderful beginnings. And for that I was eternally thankful.